In the middle of a zombie apocalypse, chaos and fear grip the world. Despite the danger everywhere, a couple, Molly and Nick, decide to take a road trip through a deserted landscape. They're on their way to meet friends at a remote airfield to escape the country. As they drive through the empty desert, Molly suddenly feels nauseous and asks Nick to pull over. Annoyed but unwilling to have her puke in the car, Nick stops by the side of the road. Molly quickly steps out, gets sick, and then heads back to the car, hoping to get going again. But when Nick tries to start the car, it's stuck in the sand. They're stranded. It's obvious they both lack a significant amount of cognitive functions because they could just push the damn car. Hoping to reach someone for help, Nick takes his phone and walks to the center of the road trying to get a signal. After a few tense moments, he manages to connect with a friend, but before he can say much, the call cuts out as the signal fades. Frustrated, they're both left wondering what to do next when they spot a figure approaching in the distance. A zombie, moving slowly but steadily toward them. They can thank God it's not one of those World War Z zombies. In a panic, Nick rushes to the car and grabs a gun for protection. With shaky hands, he fires at the approaching creature. After a few missed shots, he finally hits it, and the zombie collapses. Relieved, Nick and Molly embrace, sharing a quick kiss as they try to recover from the scare. But their relief is short-lived. The zombie starts to move again. Nick tries shooting it in the head, but it's useless. He's out of bullets, and the creature keeps coming. Desperately, they jump back into the car, hoping the safety of the vehicle will protect them. Although they're stuck, at least the zombie isn't strong enough to break through the windows. As the sun sets and darkness falls, they sit in silence, praying that the zombie will eventually lose interest and leave. Hours pass, and finally it seems to wander off. Just to be safe, Molly takes a flashlight and checks the area outside. Seeing nothing, they start to relax, thinking they're safe. Nick remembers he dropped his phone on the road and decides they should retrieve it. They both get out of the car cautiously. After a quick search, Molly spots the phone. Just as she picks it up, she sees the zombie returning, this time faster and more relentless. Before they can react, the zombie lunges at Nick, biting his neck viciously. Molly screams in horror as her boyfriend falls to the ground, lifeless, and the zombie begins devouring him. Panicked, Molly grabs her bag and takes off running, leaving the car and her fallen boyfriend behind. She doesn't stop until she's far away, collapsing in the sand, mourning Nick's death. Morning comes, and she manages to get a signal on Nick's phone. She calls her friend, begging them to wait at the airfield. They reluctantly agree, but there's no guarantee they'll hold out for long. Determined, Molly sets off across the desert on foot, making her way to the airfield. As the sun dips below the horizon, she stops to rest, but as she sits in the dark, she hears familiar shuffling footsteps. The zombie, relentless as ever, is back. Desperately, she throws a bloody tampon far away to distract it. The zombie, attracted by the scent, shambles over to investigate, giving her a few moments to run. The chase continues as the hours pass. Molly knows she's faster, but exhaustion begins to weigh her down. After a while, she spots an abandoned cottage and sneaks inside, hoping to find refuge. She hides in a bathtub, hoping her scent will stay hidden. But as she tries to stay quiet, she feels a scorpion crawl up her body. It stings, but she doesn't dare move until she's sure the zombie has left. When morning comes, Molly is exhausted, but pushes on. As the day progresses, she receives a call from her friend. There's a delay with their car, which gives her a little more time to reach the airfield. Encouraged, she keeps moving, but the desert stretches endlessly ahead, and each step feels heavier than the last. With the relentless zombie always just behind her, Molly trudges onward, the weight of grief and exhaustion pressing down. She thinks of Nick, their journey, and how close they were to escape. Determined not to let his death be in vain, she grits her teeth, glances at the distant horizon, and continues her slow, painful trek toward the airfield, hoping for salvation on the other side of this nightmare. Molly is alone in the desert, her water supply gone and exhaustion weighing on her. She feels she's at her limit, but pushes herself to keep going one more day. Just when she spots signs of civilization, a sandstorm suddenly whips across the desert. Molly tries to outrun it, but the fierce winds throw her to the ground. Struggling to see and move through the storm, she barely notices the zombie creeping up on her. It lunges, but even with limited visibility and strength, she manages to escape. When the storm finally passes, Molly wakes up covered in sand. She sees cars approaching in the distance and waves them down. Relief floods her as one of the strangers, Ted, offers her water, which she drinks desperately. They help her into their car, and Molly begins to feel safe. until she notices some unsettling details. There's a family photo that doesn't match the strangers, and prisoner uniforms in the back seat. Molly's suspicion grows as Ted starts asking questions about an airfield nearby, hoping for extra planes. Molly thanks them for the help, but insists on going her own way. When she tries to leave, she finds the car doors locked. Suddenly, a bag is thrown over her head and her breathing becomes difficult. Ted drags her outside, threatening her with a knife if she doesn't reveal the airfield's location. Molly tells them where it is, but it's not enough for them. Just as things are taking a terrible turn, the zombie appears again, attacking Ted and biting him viciously. One of the strangers panics and drives off, leaving Molly alone, wounded and exhausted in the road. Unconscious, she eventually wakes up to find the zombie still nearby, along with some leftover supplies from the fleeing stranger. She breaks down, but then notices the zombie watching her, and oddly, it brings her some comfort. She starts walking toward the airfield again, this time with the zombie as her unlikely companion. She vents to the zombie about her struggles and regrets, even tying a spare tire to it to lighten her load. As they walk together, Molly finds herself opening up, confessing how she feels inadequate compared to her siblings, especially in her role as a parent. Nearing the airfield, she finally gains control of the zombie, tying it to a rock so she can safely rest. Checking her phone, she realizes she's still 2 miles away but feels ready to face whatever comes next. With her unlikely companion in tow, on a dusty road, Molly realizes she's close to her destination. She turns to the zombie she's been traveling with, offering him a kind farewell, telling him he'll be okay. But as she's about to leave, guilt pulls at her. She remembers the pain of leaving her son behind in the past and can't bear to abandon the zombie the same way. Reluctantly, she decides to set him free. Once released, the zombie lunges toward her. Molly, scared but determined, raises her voice to control him. To her surprise, he doesn't attack, almost as if he understands her. Through this strange connection, Molly starts to feel a bond forming. That night, she opens up to the zombie about her son, sharing memories and crying over the loss. By morning, when she spots the road again, she feels relieved. Out of nowhere, a military vehicle appears. Panicking, Molly hides the zombie, fearing the soldiers will harm him. She tries to act calm as the soldiers approach, reassuring them that she's fine. They offer her a ride, but she turns them down. Just when she thinks everything's under control, the zombie stumbles into view. Molly, desperate to protect him, shields him with her body, convincing the soldiers he's harmless. Confused, they back off, but as one soldier returns to his truck, he suddenly shoots the zombie in the leg. Molly rushes to help, horrified. As she checks on him, the zombie bites her finger in his weakened state. Furious and terrified of infection, Molly douses her finger in alcohol, but the skin already looks strange. In a panic, she grabs a rock and smashes her finger off to stop the infection. She's angry and in pain, but knows she can't leave him like this. With no choice, she drags the injured zombie along the road toward her goal. After a long, exhausting trek, she finally reaches the airfield. The zombie, nearly lifeless, can barely move. Saddened, she encourages him to keep going, but he's too weak. Noticing a wallet in his pocket, she discovers he had a family in his past life. Overwhelmed by empathy, she decides to end his suffering with mercy. She picks up a large rock and delivers a final blow to his head. Now alone, Molly steps onto the airfield, only to hear gunshots. She hides under a car, but relief washes over her when she sees her friend, a fellow survivor. Her friend didn't leave her after all, and there's a chance for her to escape. He asks where her boyfriend, Nick, is, and Molly simply falls silent, her grief evident. The friend leads Molly through the airfield, explaining the tough situation they're in. They've locked some infected colleagues in a room, and there's hope when they find a working plane. But Molly has a different priority. She goes to an office to try calling her family, longing to hear her son's voice. After several attempts, the phone finally connects, and she speaks to her son, promising she'll come to him. Molly rushes back to the car but realizes she doesn't have the keys. Suspecting they might be with the infected people locked up, she steels herself and enters the room. As she searches, she's attacked by a bearded zombie. Using all her strength, she fights him off, repeatedly smashing his head until he's unconscious. The zombie doesn't have the keys, though, only his beard, which disgusts her. Just then, another zombie lunges at her, and she stumbles in fear. She spots a drill nearby, grabs it, and drives it through the zombie's head, finally ending the threat. With a sigh of relief, she finds the keys in the zombie's jacket and wastes no time getting in the car. She drives with hope, her mind set on reuniting with her son. Along the way, the desolation of her world hits her. A sea of broken bodies and ruins stretches across the landscape. Finally, she spots the house where she believes her son is hiding. Molly steps inside, hoping for a miracle, but finds her family infected. Heartbroken, she carefully climbs the stairs to her son's room, only to find it empty. She collapses in tears, clutching one of his toys. But a sound from outside catches her attention. She peers out and sees her son hiding in a small tent nearby. Relieved beyond words, she promises him she'll never leave again, vowing to protect him at all costs. Their reunion is short-lived as a horde of zombies approaches the house. In the final moments, Molly stands her ground, ready to fight for her son and reclaim what's hers, showing that her love and determination are now stronger than any fear she might face. And now, my friend, you can face the next interesting story by clicking on the recommendations on the right next. Drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. I upload every other day. Grab your popcorn, enjoy yourself, and see you soon.